Once again,
Hello. Well, first of all, let me apologize for coming late. But I have to tell you that it was not my fault. Number one, we were told that the time was 5:30. And I would have been here at 5:30, but for the news that, and let me congratulate you all on emergency being imposed on us. So this thing about December debate is a bit premature. About our manifestos, because the general is determined to stay in power every which way. It is a defining moment in Pakistan's history. Defining moment in more than one ways. But it is a time, and I'm very pleased that I was invited here to address the youth. I repeat, I'm very pleased that I have been asked here to address the youth. I think that it is a critical time for all of you. It's your future that is at stake, and this is the defining moment where you could make a difference. In my opinion, this is a time when we have a great opportunity for bringing about a change. Remember, a crisis also affords an opportunity. And this is an opportunity that Pakistan can change its course, and we can change our future. So I think that, again, thank you very much for asking me to come here. I'll speak for about 15-20 minutes, and then what I really want to hear are your questions, and so I hope to have a lively question answer. Because, as you know, we politicians tend to get carried away by the sound of our voice. We keep going much too long, and I really want your input so that at least, I know how you are thinking. So let me just start off with saying that what are the crises in Pakistan? The number one crisis is due to the war on terror. After 9/11, what we see now in Pakistan is a merging of all sorts of militant forces in this country. What started off as a hunt for Al-Qaeda by a general serving the United States interests, and what actually most of us felt that we were justified in helping the US in its war against terror, of what happened to them on 9/11. But the way the general went about it, I think most of us knew where we were heading. Because The first, of course, the bombing of Afghanistan and the Pakistan's role played in the destruction of the regime in Afghanistan. I think that was the beginning of the mess that we are right now in. Because now you find Hamid Karzai saying he wants to talk to the moderate Taliban. Actually, the time was before the bombing. And I just want to just briefly make you, let's go back to history, the facts that have been glossed over since. Before 9/11, after 9/11 and before the bombing, which was almost 3.5 weeks, in that time, basically the Taliban was saying that, look, give us the evidence and we will hand over Osama. Which was actually a very reasonable demand. Because when the Russians asked for who they perceived to be a terrorist, Ahmed Yakayov, who went to Britain to seek asylum, when the Russians wanted him back as a terrorist, what did the British government say? Give us the proofs in a court of law and we will hand him over to you. It's exactly what the Taliban was saying. And at the same time, the Shura of the Taliban had met. And you know, this fact has been glossed over. And they actually had a meeting and recommended that Osama should leave Afghanistan. So 3.5 weeks was all the time that was given for a nation, to give up what was at that time. What they were asking is that prove that he's a terrorist and we will give him to you. So once the bombing started, once that regime was destroyed, all sorts of forces were let loose, which is why it's important to understand that to know the mess we are in right now. The only way you win a war against terror, this is the most critical thing, you can only win a war on terror if the people from within whom the terrorists operate from also perceive them to be terrorists. If they perceive them to become freedom fighters, heroes, martyrs, the war is lost. History tells us that every time, once a freedom movement starts, which becomes popular amongst the people, it's impossible, because what happens is that the more people you kill, the more people join the terrorists. And this is exactly what happened. What the 9/11 terrorists never expected was that George Bush would play so well in their hands as he has done now. What we are seeing now is that, first of all, you saw the Taliban movement grow. And why did it grow? Because the Americans did not want to lose troops as they are losing in Iraq. So basically they relied on aerial bombing. And as we all know, bombs do not discriminate between terrorists, women, children, innocent people. So as the bombing increased in Afghanistan, the Taliban found a great opportunity to have a resurgence. Because in the Afghan ethos, there are two things in the Pashtun culture which has made them resist every invader from Alexander downwards. Number one is that the Pashtun society is very democratic. And because they're democratic, they have never known slavery as has been by the people of the subcontinent in the feudal culture. So basically all along this Pashtun belt, they have valued their freedom because of the peculiar system of their devolved democracy, which every village basically makes up its own decisions. So therefore, that's one of the main reasons they have resisted conquerors from time immemorial. We all know that the Mughals suffered one of their biggest defeats at Ali Masjid. We know that the Sikhs eventually were beaten there in Jamrud, where Hari Singh died after a long struggle. We know that the 80-year-old history of the British, we know that throughout the 80 years, the highest number of British troops in the 200-year rule of the British Raj, highest number of British troops died in the tribal area, specifically Waziristan. And when the Russians came, it was the same tribes, the Pashtun tribes, that resisted the Russians, and actually bore the brunt of all the casualties. So it was naive of the Americans to think that just because they are Americans, and the US cavalry has come to the rescue, for them to have expected that there would be no resistance, and for Pakistan to have gone along with them and then allowed the sort of destruction and the killing which happened in the Pashtun belt, which also led to the emergence of the MMA in Pakistan as a direct reaction to the killing of the Pashtuns. So for us to think that we would not be expected by that was only because, I'm afraid, General Musharraf has not read his history, specifically the history of the tribal area. So therefore, gradually, as the momentum built in Afghanistan, the Pashtuns on this side of the Durand line were always going to be helping them. There were elements that would have helped them. There's no way General Musharraf, no matter how hard he wanted to please the Americans, could have stopped them. It's a 1,500-kilometer border. I've been to all that area. It is the most hostile terrain you can imagine. It's rugged mountain country. There has never been any Durand line. There is no border there. And so to have expected that Pakistan forces would be able to stop any sort of infiltration was always going to be a pipe dream. And so what you have seen gradually is this movement building up. The more they have been bombed, the more bombing has taken place, the more the resistance has grown. And gradually, when Pakistan army went into Waziristan, you must remember that there was this tribal structure in Waziristan. Even when when Taliban were in power in Afghanistan, there was no Talibanization in the entire tribal area. Waziristan had its own structure. So gradually what you saw was, as the Pakistani army, and specifically when the Americans were bombed through these drones, innocent people started getting killed. More and more people, in order to seek revenge, which is the other trait of the Pashtun, that they seek revenge. Whenever someone got killed in a tribe, in a village, more or less the whole village would go to the other side, or the young men specifically. And these young men eventually started killing all the tribal elders who were cooperating with the Pakistan government. So eventually you had all the tribal maliks killed, and that whole area has now become what is called now Talibanized. But it is not a religious Talibanization, it is a political Talibanization. It's in order to seek revenge from the Pakistan army and the Americans. They have gone on to the other side. Now this is now spreading. What you're seeing is a reaction in the entire Pashtun belt against what has been going on. And now you're seeing Swat, which was one of the most peaceful areas. But by the way, the dynamics in Swat were completely different to Waziristan. Swat was a reaction of the lawlessness in Swat ever since it became part of Pakistan in 1974. In Dir and Swat, there is a great paper written by Dr. Trimzi on Dir, that what was Dir before 1974 and what happened to Dir after 1974 when it became part of Pakistan. And basically he goes on to say that how a very democratic society, where there was complete rule of law, completely changed. The moment it became civilized by Pakistan, it became complete. There was lawlessness, there was corruption, there was no justice, whereas people would have immediate justice. Suddenly justice disappeared. And what you saw, the Shariat, the Nabasi Shariat, was basically people seeking justice. And they still remembered, the elders still remembered that at the time, before 1974, people had justice. They had access to justice. Villages, if they had a problem, immediately the village Jarga would sit, they would give a decision. The moment they became part of Pakistan, people had to find lawyers, the cases got delayed, the powerful could influence the justice system, and so there was a yearning in the people that, of the old days, which was, at the time of Wali of Swat, it was basically Shariat law, as was before 1857 most of the Muslim India. So therefore there was this, so it was a different dynamics of this movement in Swat. It started off only as a desire to have a better system of justice.